in July of 1518. A woman stepped into the street in Strasbourg and she began to dance. She hadn't chosen to. She couldn't stop. And within a week, she wouldn't be dancing alone. This is a true story. It's one of the strangest events ever recorded in European history. And by the end of tonight, you'll understand not just what happened in that city, but why it happened. And somewhere in that why, there's something that might feel quietly familiar. Something about what happens to a human body when it carries more fear than it knows how to hold. But we'll get there slowly. There's no rush. Tonight, all you have to do is listen. Let your body settle into wherever you are right now. Feel the weight of it, the warmth of it. And let me take you back 500 years to a city on the edge of the Rhine. The city of Strasbourg in 1518 was not a peaceful place. Not in any deep sense. On the surface, it was a prosperous city, a trading city, one of the wealthiest in the Holy Roman Empire. Merchants moved along the Rhine, cloth and grain and spices passed through on their way to other places. The cathedral rose above everything, enormous, pink stone, one of the tallest structures in the known world at that time. And yet, underneath the commerce and the bells and the trade routes, Strasbourg was suffering. The years leading up to 1518 had been cruel years. Famine had come through several times. Harvests failed, the winters had been long, and the summers too wet. Syphilis was moving through Europe like a slow fire. Smallpox came and went and came back. The plague, the Black Death's descendants, still lived in collective memory. People remembered what it had taken from their grandparents, from their parents. Taxation from the ruling classes pressed down on the poor. And in Strasbourg, the poor were very poor. Guilds controlled who could work and how. The gap between those who had enough and those who were hungry was wide and growing. And there was something else pressing down on people, something harder to measure. Fear. Not just fear of starvation or disease, though those were real, but a deeper kind of fear, a spiritual fear. The people of Strasbourg lived in a world where God was very close, where sin was visible and punishment was real, where the devil wasn't a metaphor, but a presence, an actual creature that moved through the world and could find you. And if God was angry, if the community had sinned, then punishment would come in the form of hunger, in the form of disease, in the form of things that couldn't be explained. This was the world that Frau Trophea woke up in on a morning in mid-July. Her name appears in one historical document, just one. We don't know much about her, we don't know how old she was, we don't know if she had children, we don't know what she looked like. We know that she lived in Strasbourg. We know the name her husband used. We know what she did next. She walked out of her home and into the street. And she began to dance. The sources don't describe what kind of dancing it was. Not formal, not choreographed. Just movement, involuntary movement. Her body moving without her deciding to move it. Witnesses described it later. They said she danced silently. There was no music. She danced for hours. People stopped to watch. Some laughed initially, some were confused. Her husband tried to make her stop. She couldn't stop. By evening, her feet were bleeding through her shoes. She slept eventually, and in the morning, she danced again. This went on for 4 days, then 5, then 6. By the end of the first week, the skin on her feet was raw. Her body was exhausted in ways that sleep couldn't fix. And she still couldn't stop. The city authorities noticed. The physicians were called. Now, remember where we are. This is 1518. Medical understanding was limited. Physicians in this era worked from a framework called humoral theory. The body was governed by 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile. Disease happened when these were out of balance. The physicians examined Frau Trophäa and gave their diagnosis. Hot blood. She had too much hot blood. And their recommended treatment was more dancing. The city authorities agreed with this assessment, and they made a decision that, from a modern perspective, seems almost impossible to believe. They hired musicians. They opened the guild halls and the grain market. They brought in professional dancers to dance alongside her, hoping that by giving the affliction somewhere to go, it would eventually exhaust itself and stop. The musicians played, and within days, others joined in. First it was a handful, 5, 10, then more. Within 2 weeks of Frau Trophäa first stepping into the street, approximately 50 people were dancing. And the number kept climbing. By August, some estimates say as many as 400 people were caught in the dancing. 400 people in a city of maybe 20,000, moving through the streets, through the guild halls, through the squares. Day and night, day and night, unable to stop. I want you to take a moment and really try to picture this. Not as something funny, not as something from a history book. Imagine being there. It's August in Strasbourg. The days are long and warm. The streets smell of animals and cooking and the river. And in the squares and alleys of your city, your neighbors are dancing. They're not happy. They're not celebrating. Their faces are not joyful. The contemporary accounts describe them as blank or anguished, some of them weeping as they moved. Their feet had long since stopped being able to feel. Some had collapsed. Some had been carried away. A few had died. Heart attacks from the exertion, stroke, exhaustion. The chronicles of the time describe people dancing until their feet were pulp, until they lost consciousness, until their hearts gave out. The city was terrified. And the more people who joined, the more terrified the city became. Because no one, not the physicians, not the clergy, not the city fathers, had any idea what was happening. Nothing in their framework could explain this. The church had a theory, of course. Saint Vitus. Saint Vitus was a Christian martyr from the 4th century, and somewhere over the intervening 1200 years, he had acquired a very specific association. Dancing, or more precisely, the curse of uncontrollable dancing. If you had angered Saint Vitus, or if a saint had sent this affliction upon you as punishment, you would dance involuntarily until you were freed from it. This event in Strasbourg became known eventually as Saint Vitus's dance. The authorities changed course. They stopped the music. They closed the guild halls. They banned dancing entirely in the city. And they sent the afflicted on a pilgrimage to the shrine of Saint Vitus in Saverne, about 30 miles away. And here the historical record gets quieter. We know the pilgrimage happened, we know people were sent. And the dancing plague gradually ended. By September of 1518, it was largely over. Just as suddenly as it had begun. Strasbourg went back to its life. The markets opened again, the guild meetings resumed, people went to church and came home and made their meals. But something had happened. Something enormous and inexplicable had moved through this city and left. And for a long time, historians didn't quite know what to do with it. The event was recorded at the time by several chroniclers. City officials wrote about it, physicians wrote about it. It appeared in religious tracts as evidence of divine punishment. It appeared in medical texts as an example of unusual humoral imbalance. For centuries after, it mostly sat there, in the dusty corners of European medical and ecclesiastical history, a curiosity, an anomaly. Until a historian named John Waller started looking at it seriously. John Waller is a medical historian, and in the early 2000s, he became somewhat obsessed with the dancing plague. He went through every primary source he could find. He cross-referenced the chronicles. He looked at the medical and social history of the region. And he built what I think is the most complete and compassionate explanation of what actually happened in Strasbourg in 1518. It doesn't involve demons. It doesn't involve mass delusion in the dismissive sense. It involves the human body doing something extraordinary under extraordinary pressure. The explanation that most modern historians and psychologists find most persuasive is a concept called mass psychogenic illness. Let me explain what this means, because it's not what it might sound like. It doesn't mean people were faking. It doesn't mean they were weak or stupid or impressionable in some contemptible way. It means something far more interesting. The human nervous system is extraordinarily good at one thing above all else: survival. Every other function the body performs is, in some sense, secondary to that one imperative: stay alive. And when the nervous system detects a threat, any threat, it responds automatically, without consulting the conscious mind. The heart rate goes up, muscles tense, breath changes, perception narrows. You know this feeling. Most people listening to this right now know this feeling. Now imagine that threat never goes away. Not for a day or a week, but for years. Imagine that every morning you wake up, there is a genuine possibility that today is the day the harvest fails completely, that the next wave of plague arrives, that your child gets sick and there is nothing you can do to help them. Imagine that your God is not a gentle, distant force, but an active, watchful presence, who keeps records of every sin and dispenses punishment accordingly. Imagine that the devil is real, that witches are real, that the world is full of invisible forces that want to harm you. This was not paranoia for the people of 1518 Strasbourg. This was consensus reality. This was simply the world. John Waller argues that by 1518, the population of Strasbourg had been living under extreme, sustained psychological pressure for years. Multiple famines, multiple disease outbreaks, economic inequality grinding people down. And in that climate, the body found a release valve. When Frau Trophäa began to dance, something in the collective nervous system of Strasbourg recognized it. Not consciously, not deliberately, but deep in the part of the brain that handles threat and stress and the desperate need for something to break open. Her dancing said something, and others answered. This is how mass psychogenic illness works. It spreads, not through air or water or touch, but through shared belief, through shared expectation, through the profound human tendency to take cues about our own experience from the people around us. If the people around you are sick, your body notices. If the framework you've been given to understand the world says that dancing is a punishment from God, that it can spread, that you might be next, your body listens. And in a population already running on empty, already primed for collapse, the suggestion alone was enough. Now, here's the part I want you to sit with for a moment. The bodies of those dancers weren't broken. They weren't malfunctioning. They were doing exactly what bodies do, under unbearable pressure. They were finding a way out. A release, an exit from the impossible weight of sustained, unrelenting fear. Ugly, painful, devastating as it was, the dancing was the body saying, I cannot hold this anymore. 1518 was not the first time this happened. Not even close. There are recorded outbreaks of mass dancing illness going back to at least the 14th century, possibly earlier. In 1374, following the devastation of the Black Death, mass dancing erupted simultaneously in multiple cities along the Rhine. Aachen, Cologne, Metz. Thousands of people, the same pattern, involuntary, anguished, unstoppable. In 1237, children in the German town of Erfurt reportedly danced involuntarily all the way to a neighboring town, 17 miles away. In Italy, a different version emerged called tarantism, the belief that a spider's bite caused uncontrollable dancing, and that only a specific kind of frenzied movement could cure it. Villages developed their own music for it, specific rhythms that were said to draw the poison out. The tarantella, still danced today in southern Italy, is named for this. A folk dance born from mass psychological crisis. What these outbreaks share is timing. They cluster around periods of extreme collective stress, famine, plague, war, periods when ordinary people had been asked to carry more than human beings are built to carry, for longer than human beings were built to carry it. The body eventually stops asking permission. I want to come back to something I said near the beginning. I said there might be something in this story that feels quietly familiar. I wonder if it does. Because if you're someone who struggles to sleep, if anxiety visits you in the quiet hours, if your body sometimes feels like it's carrying something that your mind hasn't fully caught up to yet, then you already know something of what those dancers knew. Not the same, nothing in your life is the same as what they faced. But the mechanism, the body that has been running the threat detection system for too long, the nervous system that can't quite get the signal that says, it's safe now, you can let go. The people of Strasbourg didn't know what was happening to them. They had no framework for understanding the relationship between sustained fear and what the body does with it. You have something they didn't. You can name it. You can recognize the tightness in your chest, or the thoughts that circle at 2 in the morning, or the exhaustion that sleep doesn't seem to fix. And you can know that this is not punishment. This is not evidence that something is fundamentally wrong with you. This is a very old, very intelligent system, doing its best, trying to keep you safe. And it can learn over time that it doesn't need to work quite so hard. Frau Trophea eventually stopped dancing. We don't know what happened to her after, whether the pilgrimage helped, whether she recovered fully, whether she ever spoke of it. History doesn't hold her story beyond that summer. But she walked out into a street one morning, and something moved through her that was larger than she was. And then it passed, and she went home. Let the story settle now. Let it go soft at the edges, the way stories do when you're almost asleep. The dancing plague of 1518. A city on the Rhine, a summer that got strange and frightening and then slowly went quiet again. Like summers do, like nights do. You don't have to hold any of this. The story is finished, or finished enough. Your body has been listening for almost an hour now. And listening is good work, quiet work, the kind of work that helps the nervous system remember that right now, in this moment, there is nothing required of it. Nothing to solve, nothing to prevent. Just this. The weight of your body where it rests. The slow movement of your breath. In as and out. Somewhere 500 years ago, a woman danced in a street. And the whole city danced with her. And eventually, it stopped. Everything does, eventually. Even this, even tonight. Even the thoughts that visit at the edges of sleep. They pass through, they always pass through. Sleep well. There's nothing left to figure out tonight. The story is done. And you are safe. If tonight helped you drift off a little easier, there are more stories like this one waiting for you. The history of the world is full of strange and quiet things. And we'll be here whenever you need to come back. Sleep well.